Good evening. Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to this next installment in our City Imagines series, Narratives of Resistance, with Catherine Hernandez, Pamela Palmater, and Erica Ifill. The Word on the Street, or WATS for short, is a festival of books, ideas, and imagination. But we're also more than that. WATS is a community. We asked, and you told us what matters most about the WATS experience: discovery, inspiration, connection. Our community is creative and resilient, and we're excited to bring the word on the street to you in your homes. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that WATS Toronto operates on land that is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. This territory is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Anishinaabeg and Allied Nations to care for and share the resources around the Great Lakes in peace. Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people with long histories on this land, and we're privileged to live, work, and create in this territory, and strive to act with awareness and solidarity. We encourage you to educate yourself about the land you occupy, wherever you're tuning in from. Before I turn things over to our moderator, a few words about the next events in this series. This coming Monday, September 14th at 7 p.m., right here on YouTube, we're presenting a special conversation and live recipe demo with Chef Joshna Maharaj, author of Take Back the Tray, Revolutionizing Food in Hospitals, Schools, and Institutions, moderated by Paul Taylor, CEO of Food Share Toronto. Then, our Words Across Canada series continues on Tuesday, September 15th, and we've partnered with Wild Words North to discuss decolonizing children's literature with authors Christy Jordan Fenton, Rebecca Thomas, and Dr. Jenny K. Dupuis. You can find more details about these events on our website or Eventbrite, links in the banner below, and live in the comments section. Without further ado, please welcome our moderator for the evening, Erica Ifill. Erica is an economist, columnist, and activist who founded Not in My Color, the first intersectional business design agency. With this new venture, she's determined to address the systems and policies that prevent representation at all levels in the workplace. Erica co-founded the Bad and Bitchy podcast, which focuses on politics, technology, and society from an equity perspective. She's also columnist for the Hill Times, where she writes about federal politics with an intersectional feminist context, and whose additional bylines include Maclean's, Policy Options, and the Globe and Mail. Erica, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Let me introduce our guests today. The first is Catherine Hernandez, who is a proud queer brown femme author. She is of Filipino, Spanish, Chinese, and Indian heritage, and she is married into the Navajo Nation. Hernandez is the author of the acclaimed and award-winning novel Scarborough. Crosshairs is her second novel. And Dr. Pamela Palmater. She is a Mi'kmaq lawyer, author, and social justice activist from Eel River Bar First Nation. She has 4 university degrees, including a doctorate in law. Pam has worked with First Nations for over 25 years, advancing Native education, sovereignty, and nation building. She currently holds the position of professor and chair in Indigenous governance at Ryerson University. So let's start off with listening to an excerpt from your book, Catherine. First of all, welcome. It is an honor to do this and to be a part of this panel and moderating it. I can't wait to just talk to you about a lot of the themes in your books. As we know, 2020 has gone to hell, and it's amazing. It's amazing how timely these two books are, to be honest. So, Catherine, let's start with you.
Oh, thank you so much. I also want to say that you both are just so cool. And you're this is just amazing. I'm really honored to share space with you. And I really do wish that we could share a post-Watts ice cream together.
I know.
So I'll read from my novel Crosshairs, which this is what it looks like. My publishers would want you all to know what it looks like. So Crosshairs is about racialized, QT BIPOC folks, the disabled and the elderly having to learn to take arms against a rising fascist regime. And that fascist regime putting those populations into work camps following mass environmental disaster and financial devastation. And so this particular part of the book is when four people from the QT BIPOC community who are shacking up together during the time when the genocidal campaign is unfolding, they're realizing that there's a point where they actually have to hide, either go into hiding or face possible like being put into work camps, as I had mentioned. So here it is. They are in a room together, and it is close to New Year's Day. Their heat has been turned off, and there is four of them huddling together in a bed, hoping for a reprieve. Yet again that night, in the freezing cold and deafening quiet, all four of us gathered under several blankets and coats and tried to sleep. We lay widthwise on Nolan's bed so that all of us could fit. I tried to make circles with my breath in the air. Fanny shifted constantly. Nolan suggested we sing songs together. We felt too weak to join in. You snored softly. We fought over who could hold Sedgwick, so this is a tiny dog, since his tiny body held so much heat, and petting him made us all less anxious about the things to come. Do you remember that ice storm that happened back in 2013? Said Fanny. We groaned. We shivered. I remember breaking up with some loser who refused to wear condoms. I sent him and his dirty dick out into the slippery glass of the night, and I locked the door. Felt good to let him slide and fumble his way home. We laughed quietly. Sedgwick was in my lap. I placed my hands on his warm fur and could hear his tummy grumbling. That's when I felt the words finally come to my mouth. In my hunger, in Sedgwick's hunger, I finally believed what Nadine had said. My loves. I felt the void of silence. I measured the silence's width, length, and depth. I measured the words I was going to place in that void, unsure if they would fit. What is it, Kay? Nolan said impatiently, while tucking the edges of a blanket under his feet. Your soft snoring stopped, and you came too. I told them about our encounter with Nadine, what Nadine's father knew. 72 Homewood, this person named Liv. I told them that at some point you and I were going to run and hide. I told them they needed to come with us or they wouldn't be safe. We were in real danger, and we could be in danger for a very long time. No. Nolan suddenly left the bed, and the blankets became 2 degrees colder. What do you mean? I asked. The remaining 3 humans and dog all shuffled together again to accumulate body heat. Nolan shivered towards his closet door. I mean, no. No, I will not hide. I will not hide. I will not hide. I will not hide. He said it so many times, it almost became a song. Nolan, please, Fanny cried. No. I have been told to hide my entire life. I will not hide. He opened his closet door and began rummaging through his things. What are you doing? What does it look like I'm doing, Kay? I'm going out. Don't be a fool, Nolan. Fanny held the top edge of the blanket under her chin in 2 fists. You're going to get yourself killed. Sedgwick whimpered under the covers in protest of the conflict between us. You know who's the fool, Fanny? You, for keeping a dog in here when we don't even have the means to feed it and we can't even walk the damn dog at night. Who the hell lets a dog shit and piss in the corner of a house? I don't have a choice. We can't leave the house past 9 at night, and I clean up the mess when we have water. I added cautiously, yeah, Fanny. If we have to run, the reality is we can't bring Sedgwick. And why not? Fanny scooped her dog and held him firmly. We'll be in hiding, not at a Holiday Inn. We can't risk the barking. We can't risk having another being to take care of. We need to travel light. He's my baby. He's not a piece of luggage. She screamed back at me. Fuck this conversation. Nolan threw his hands up in exasperation. He slipped on 2 thigh-high boots and a short fur coat to finish his look. You chimed in. The street lights aren't even on, Nolan. Who knows who's out there waiting for you? Exactly. I guess I won't know until I'm out there. You're going to get yourself killed. You rushed up and tried to block Nolan at the doorframe. I told you what happened when I tried to cross that checkpoint the other day. No one is getting through. There's no escape. You don't even know what that means. You don't even know what it means to run. But you know who does? My parents. You think keeping silent, doing what they were told to do in the work camps kept them alive? It didn't. I was raised by 2 Cambodian zombies, Evan. 2 walking skeletons who lived in fear, doing that shit like that may keep you breathing, but you're not alive. Hiding is like death. This is me. I'm proud to be me. I'm not hiding, Evan. Nolan choked back a sob. He snapped his fingers trying to place a memory. It was hard to remember things these days when all around us things were changing. What was her name? Our drag sister who died during the Pulse nightclub shooting. Glorious. I inhaled deeply at the thought of her. She was a big name in Oakland. She just happened to be in Orlando for a gig at the gay club's Latino night. A shooter opened fire on the attendees, killing 49 of them. Yes. Glorious. Do you remember her dance number? The one with the bananas on her head and the bikini? We all laughed wistfully. Can you imagine the horror of that gunman entering the premises and just spraying bullets into people, the people rushing into the bathrooms trying to hide? The piles of dead bodies? Supposedly an inch of blood covered the floor. That's how bad it was. We listened with tight jaws. Nolan softly brushed the tears off his face and wiped the wet onto his pants. She was glorious to the very end. She died in costume with her stilettos still on. She died being herself. But what about those people who hid? They are alive today and able to be who they are because of it, I added, hoping to change the tide. Okay, those people in this new world are probably still hiding or worse. I can't chance that. I can't hide. I will not hide. Nolan's voice quavered. He wiped his nose, then composed his proud face. I watched you step aside. It must have been so hard, my love, but you did. You stepped aside and let him go. We all listened to the front door of our suite slam closed. Nolan stormed out into the blackness of the night. We listened to his heels clicking across the pavement until we heard nothing but silence.
Wow, that's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, y'all. Thank you.
Pamela, you go next, because I'm going to get stuck in talking about Catherine, and I'll get there later, but you go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you. That was really powerful.
It was.
Yeah. So my book, it's not out yet, but I do have a picture of it for my publisher as well. By Fernwood Publishing. It's called Warrior Life, Indigenous Resistance and Resurgence. And it really is a companion book to this one that I did by Fernwood, Indigenous Nationhood Empowering Grassroots Citizens. The two really go together, not just because they're both published by Fernwood, but because they're both a collection of blogs and op-eds and magazine articles and publications that I've done, which are little snippets of what's been happening over the years. And they both have new content and updates to each of those things. But the core difference is that my first book spanned the entire Harper era. So the conservative government's relationship with Native peoples. And this new book, clearly, it spans the Trudeau era and its relationship with Native peoples. And the core theme of my new book is that we have new governors, but the same colonialism. So you can, breach Native rights with an angry face, or you can breach Native rights with a charming face. but at the end of the day, you're still breaching Native rights. So my first book was really focused on the need for us to exercise our voice and to speak out against injustices. And this next book is about following up from that voice and taking concrete action. And sometimes that means boots on the ground, but they both focus on people power. So I'm just going to read a small section of just the very beginning. There has been a changing of the guard in Canada's colonizing governors, from conservative to liberal, but they still preside over a racist, patriarchal country that remains fully engaged in the violent colonization of Indigenous lands and bodies. Ongoing racism and violence by the state and its agencies is the direct root cause of all the suffering in so many of our families, communities, and nations. The extent of the damage has been and continues to be done by Canada's colonizing governors and their corporate beneficiaries, and that has led to massive loss of life since contact. There's no doubt that Canada, pre and post Confederation, has engaged in a manifest pattern of conduct that reflects an intention to destroy Indigenous peoples spiritually, culturally, and physically. There's only one word that could possibly hope to encapsulate the centuries-long targeted campaign of violence, dispossession, and oppression of Indigenous peoples on Turtle Island, and that's genocide. And we're not talking about a history of genocide. We are talking about the biggest human rights crisis facing Canada today, right now. And this insight into genocide as ongoing crimes and ongoing human rights violations against Indigenous peoples is critical knowledge to empowering Canadians to see through the false narrative that has been created by politicians. Because the problem isn't liberal or conservative. And the sooner that we understand that, the better prepared we're going to be to hold Canada to account. Warrior Life covers all of these issues, exposing the contradiction between Trudeau's so-called reconciliation agenda and his ongoing failure to address genocide. And while Trudeau has convinced many Canadians of his commitment to renewing the relationship with Indigenous peoples based on a nation-to-nation relationship and respect for Indigenous rights, his government has done anything but that. His nation-to-nation relationship has literally skipped over the actual rights holders and sovereign Indigenous nations. He instead chooses to maintain the status quo, often with the support of national Aboriginal organizations. And at every opportunity he has had to show Canada respect for Indigenous rights, he has dashed those hopes with grave violations of our rights. From buying a pipeline to trying to defeat Indigenous rights to failing to address the public safety crisis of sexualized violence against Indigenous women and girls, reconciliation has turned out to be a lie. Thus, the story of our resistance at the grassroots level continues.
So I was a fan of the tone of the book because, as a Black woman, I don't see Trudeau doing much either. So I am right there with you. I want to, I think most people, if you take Catherine's book, most people would ask, how do we get here? How do we get to the point where work camps are for marginalized people are a reality? I love that you called it the renovation, by the way. I had to bring this up because it sounds so Toronto.
Well, it's that really great way. I think, especially when, after listening to Pamela's amazing introduction, is that Canadians are so good at this marketing campaign.
Yes.
If you want to think about Canada as a whole, as a nation, is that it's like, I feel like whoever is like the marketing team for Canada as a whole, skilled at the euphemisms. And so I really wanted to choose a word that rationalizes genocide. So for me, renovation sounded like something that I was like, it sounded like it's an improvement on what our nation would look like. And that's what I wanted. It's something like I really wanted to, in my mind while writing it, think about how could I rationalize this behavior. So yeah.
I thought it was perfect. It honestly, it was one of those words which is very almost genteel in the form of the way it describes basically a destruction of humanity and genocide. So coming back to genocide, I remember when the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Report and Girls, report came out, and I said, I bet you they're gonna latch onto this genocide thing. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. Canada seems to be more interested in the vanity project of an issue than the substance of the issue itself. So can you both speak on, well, Pam, can you speak on that too?
Yeah, well, I mean, lots of us had legal standing before the National Inquiry, and we specifically asked them to call it out as genocide. And we said, listen, if Indigenous women and girls can't call it what it is, who else is going to? And what else can you call it? It can't be only genocide if it happens in a different country. And right now, Canada's paying the price because of the genocide in Myanmar. At the International Court of Justice, they're saying, hey, listen, Canada, we don't know if you can be making interventions here because you're coming to court with dirty hands. And the international community should be saying that. But, to pick up on, Catherine's, really clever use of this word renovation, think about what Canada has been saying, like Catherine's saying, they're their best PR firm. And look at what Canada's doing. So Canada's managed to continue on with the project of genocide. They just use different words. So in the early days, it was called elimination. And then, you know what? That sounds a little bit too aggressive. So let's call it assimilation.
Assimilation.
Well, we know what assimilation was. So then, you go in a couple decades later and they're calling it integration. We're integrating you. And now under Trudeau, they call it social inclusion. But it's all the same way of saying you don't get to be Native. You have to be who we are. And the we that they're talking about is this white nationalist vision of essentially a transported European Canada. And that essentially others everybody else, whether it's Indigenous peoples, Black peoples. I mean, if you don't fit that white Euro standard, that's why we have so many problems.
That's exactly it. And to actually go back and just say that this is baked into Canada like hockey, like the maple leaf. Okay, it is very Canadian to engage in systemic elimination and marginalization of people who aren't white Christians, fit into that white Christian mold. I mean, so I wrote this piece for the Globe on Sir John A. And when I was researching it, I was like, oh my God, I don't know what it is about 1885. I think it was the railroad. And I think it was, the connecting of Canada Pacific to the rest of the nation and connecting BC. But some damn atrocities happened that year. And the atrocities that happened were codified into law. And that is the material point, that it's not just the reason that this sort of systemic marginalization is as Canadian as apple pie is because it was there at our founding. And I just want people to understand how much this is very much us. We're not multicultural in the same way that in terms of freedom, in terms of rights, in terms of power. And that is the point, that multiculturalism was never about sharing power. Just like the Indian Act was never about sharing power. It was just codified, colonialism, basically. And so I think those are the two things, those are the themes, some of the themes, the main themes that both of your books identify and really interrogate, because I haven't seen the interrogation of those things in Canadian media writ large. I will say that. So that's what I found. And that's why I was like, ooh, this is my kind of tea. But I mean, I think that if we go back to Catherine's description of Sedgwick, the dog, I think about how Sedgwick was the last of humanity for her, in a way. And I just wonder if I'm off on that, or if I'm like, people try to hang on to the last vestiges of humanity when you're being attacked. I feel like first you try to comply, right? And you try to assimilate, and it just eats at you. It just requires more and more and more of you. The cost starts piling up on the individual, and which extends to the community writ large. And I see that. And I think, Pam, you kind of talked about that in your book in a way that I thought was from a very interesting perspective. So I was wondering if you guys could talk about that.
I when you're thinking about Sedgwick, about this dog, about like, whether or not you take a dog. I mean, like, this is the thing, is that when the people who I've interviewed who have survived war, and then also the fact that, my family, we had to make some very difficult decisions in order to flee martial law in the Philippines, is that there's just weird things where you're like, do I bring that thing? Do I bring that little box that my grandmother gave me if we're going to be going on a ferry for 3 days, and I might be sexually assaulted? But like, do I bring that jacket? Like, all of these really weird choices that you have to make in the face of war, right? Is that something like a choice to stay with your dog might mean you facing imminent death, and you deciding to continue being who you are, and not code switching, means that you're facing death. And then also, how does it feel too, especially because I am from the Filipino community, is that this idea of like buying into Christian supremacy in order to navigate your own safety, right? How does that feel like a betrayal in your body? And how does, constantly, infiltrating from within in order to be safe, how does that change your body? It's something that I was constantly thinking about in the novel, because I think it's affected us in such different ways. Definitely with my community, I think in our bodies, there's this idea of either just blending in to be safe, agreeing, being submissive and hardworking, just trying to be agreeable with everybody in order to stay safe, and just sort of like creating this proximity to whiteness that's really important to us, right? And I need to call that out, because that's definitely how I grew up, is to really show that you're like the better brown people in order to be safe.
Yep.
And how that's changed my body, and how I have to work against that in my body in order to continue the fight, because I know that I refuse to uphold that lie. It actually, one thing I always tell people who do have privilege, which I do feel I do, because I'm a cisgender person, an Asian presenting person who has always had access to water, and my family has never been broken apart by CAS, and I don't have to worry about the police, is that it actually is a lot of calories, a lot of shame, and a lot of pain in my body, chronic pain in my body, upholding a lie. And I'm done. It's a big journey, I think, for all of us. And I think right now, what I'm hoping for is that marketing campaign that Canada is so good at creating, is that we can, with our whole bodies, break it the fuck down. Because I wanna burn it down. I wanna pee on it. I wanna shit on its face. Because it's really gotten to that point where I feel I'm so done with this rhetoric, and I'm ready for actual change, even if it ends up hurting us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I totally understand that, especially in the Black community, we have respectability politics, which is based on its own anti-Blackness. And I'm trying to work through the anti-Blackness that I've been taught. And so I am on that journey too, because I recognize that proximity to whiteness. It's so funny because I said something similar on a podcast like months ago. It's this proximity to whiteness is seen as power in a lot of racialized communities. Actually, I don't know one racialized community it doesn't hit, to be honest. And Pam, I can only imagine, like, you started off the book with really a look at the Indigenous community, or Indigenous communities, let me say, and how, there is the people on the ground who are fighting to maintain their identity, who they are, where they're from, for example, Rio Tinto, the CEO, I don't know if everybody knows, in Australia, apparently he stepped down because they basically blew up an Indigenous ancestral burial ground. Something like 46,000 years this thing has been around. I mean, that is violence against people, violence that will never get justice. And it angers me to the point where I too am done. I'm done because I'm tired of having to fight this violence. So Pam, I know, take it away, because I know you're all about that. So.
No, well, I mean, what Catherine was saying, she's reading from her book, and you can just imagine all of that playing out. That's not even far-fetched, you know? And here, that's what colonization, white Euro, supremacist type colonization does. It forces us to make these decisions that we don't want to make. So you think of like Native kids in residential schools. What was your choice? You were going to be beaten, potentially murdered. If you spoke your language, you'd be starved, neglected, and abused. But if you didn't, you would lose your culture and your ability to connect with your parents if you ever saw them again. So you've got little kids forced to make decisions to try to save their lives. Some of them hid and spoke their language in secret and tried not to get caught. Others said, I need to live another day. And so, and then you come out of that, and we live in a world of judgment where people are judging you. Are you Native enough? Do you speak your language? Do you know your customs? And without really thinking about all of the, centuries of colonization that has been put on us, and, trying to fight back against that. At the same time, you've got more and more people coming to Canada being indoctrinated into Canada's vision of Canada, which seems like the happier place, the multicultural place, the human rights place, the, happy economy, great place to live place. And so people naturally would want to be a part of that, and then look down at us and say, well, you're not just pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. What's wrong with you? You're just complaining. I work hard and I do it right. And so Canada has created a scenario that pits people against one another, so that we're in a race to the bottom or we're in a race to the top. We can't just be. And as Native people, if we're impoverished or if we're living on the streets, well, we're just not picking ourselves up by our bootstraps. However, on the other side of things, if we manage to get a business, if we manage to work in a good job, well, we're the Aboriginal industry, we're the elite, we're living high on the hog, and what about everybody else? There's no place for Native people to be in any state, good, bad, or otherwise. And I feel like Canadians have been so filled with propaganda and, overt and systemic racism through our education system, through looking at Sir John A. statues. I mean, all of it, that we're having to do a whole lot of work to say, hey, Canadians, whether you're old settlers or new settlers, or you've been here 200 years or 20 days, look at what's happened, look at what continues to happen, and kind of join us in this decolonization, because it's not just about Native people being decolonized. Like, everybody needs to be decolonized and tear down this system, because you said it was baked in. It is. And the US, Canada and the US were created with this white white supremacist ideology, which privileged whiteness and white history and white culture and white religion, and correspondingly punished Native culture and Native ideology and Black slaves and their ideologies and everyone else. And it's in every single law. It's in our economic systems, our governing systems, even in our entertainment. So you look at Catherine's book and you say, you know what? All of that is so real. Like, that literally, of course, that would play out.
I honestly thought, I was like, oh, is that 2021?
Yeah.
No, I kid you not. I was like, okay, so I should set my timer now, because it is very, very foreseeable.
What's interesting, though, is that like when you see certain critiques of the novel, is that some people are like, sometimes it's like, it seems so outrageous what I've written, or it seems like over the top. And then one critic had said about the book is that I was handling too much when it came to like all of the global issues in the book. And I thought, I wanted to scream. I wanted to open up my window and scream.
Yeah.
We know it's too much.
Yes.
It feels like too much. Like, if people don't understand that, all three of our experiences with all of our backgrounds, our cultural identities are actually connected through this system of whiteness. If we don't see that, then we're not going to get anywhere. And if you don't, the enormity of it is real. It is large, and it's horrible, and it feels large, and that's what I wanted to capture in the book. I wanted to ask you, Pam, I mean, like, when you're talking about the system that's baked into all of us, I mean, you have like so many accomplishments academically, and also being a lawyer. I mean, and that's a system that has been given to you. What does that? I mean, how do you navigate that? Yeah, because like I'm just like, because that's a lot. I mean, like, those are pieces of paper and achievements that are definitely from a white lens, but like, I mean, what do you do with that? That's a lot.
Well, it's a matter of, like, I'm so thankful that I grew up. I had 8 sisters and 3 brothers, and the majority of them were very politically active. My father told them, go out and, take care of this. And they literally took me everywhere, to every protest, every government negotiation, every community information session, and kind of said, we're in for the fight of our lives, and we need tools to do that. So they would send me out to a negotiation with a government over fishing rights, and I was in high school. What do you mean? Who am I to negotiate? And that was their point to me. So the government on the other side's like, who are you? Why are you sitting at this table? So my family's like, you need to go and get an education. And I get an education. It's like, well, who are you? You're no expert. Okay, so a degree is not enough. I'll go to law school. But then that's still not enough, because you're not an expert in X, Y, and Z. And I kept trying to get as many, letters behind my name as possible, until I realized, wait a second, I am never going to be enough. Like, there's nothing you can do if you're Indigenous and a woman to be enough in their eyes. And so I had to stop looking at my life's mission through their eyes and looked at it through mine and said, you know what? Thank goodness I was grounded in Native teachings, Native ideologies, and a decolonization kind of idea or background from my family. Because if I hadn't been, and I'd gone to and done all this university and gone to law school, I know it would have been so easy to be sucked into, life is just a house and a mortgage and a car and some travel, and, just don't look around and don't bother yourself about what's happening. That they said, I don't even have the right to call myself a Mi'kmaq unless I am always, first and foremost, defending our people and our rights. And so that kind of helps you get through law school, because what they're teaching you is colonial law, how to oppress, how to dispossess, how to deny rights, how to defend murderers, like all of it. And so if you're not grounded in something, you're going to get lost in it. So I'm thankful to my family for that, because honestly, that's quite a thing. It's quite a thing. And so now I feel good because, so many people across the country, like social media has allowed us to maintain bigger connections with our communities and our activists. Like, we're in solidarity with Black Lives Matter and anti-poverty groups and human rights groups and anti-homelessness groups. So our communities keep getting bigger and stronger in solidarity. So I think, the future for people moving forward is going to be a lot better. We're going to be far stronger together.
Oh, well, especially with someone like you, helping us out. That's like so amazing. You're so inspiring. Like both of you are just so accomplished. Holy cow.
I feel like I say the same thing about you guys. First of all, Pam, I've been a quiet fan of yours for a little bit. Quiet. I'm not quiet, but By the way, Catherine, I love the loud lady. Okay, I was like, this is my kind of thing.
Oh, it's when your Twitter handle basically makes people like, it already challenges people's ideas of like what an Asian woman is going to be. That's basically what it is.
Yes,
it's just like already it's it's. I just want, as soon as people interact with me, they sort of understand that it's like, I really don't give a shit. Like, that kind of thing. That's like mainly what it is.
Because you're done. You're just done.
I'm done. I'm just like, and oh my gosh, there's something that I have to share with you. Have you all read the book, Adrienne Marie Brown's Pleasure Activism? Especially because of the work that all three of us do.
Okay, I'm writing this down.
You have to write this down. Everyone has to read this book, because I really feel anybody who is doing any kind of resilience work, especially because of this conversation, is that, I'm hoping I'm going to do her work justice, but her argument is that the revolution can start with just our own bodies. As in, like, I'm going to care for myself, and this is the revolution. And I'm going to also, I'm going to have good sex. I'm going to eat well. I'm going to, treat myself to things, because no one can stop me from treating myself. And then also it helps us, because of the resilience work that we're doing, is that it helps us continue the fight. Because there's always this mindset. Like, I remember having a mindset not so long ago of being like, you have to keep on going. You have to keep on going. Don't stop fighting. And I really feel that because of that and surviving trauma, is that now I'm chronically ill. And hearing that message from Adrienne Marie Brown's book is really powerful, because I'm just going to always center my needs. Because if I don't center my needs, then the revolution can't actually happen. Like, we can't, it happens. And again, she talks, like, she actually begins it by saying, before you begin this book, go and masturbate and then come see me in a minute. Because like, there's like this idea of like, love yourself, and I think that that's such a revolutionary thing to say, is that, your body comes first. And so that it's just so powerful. And I just wanted to share that with with all of us, just because it's important.
I truly think loving yourself is an act of resistance, because we're not supposed to love who and what we are. We're supposed to love whiteness. And if we love ourselves, it means we're not putting whiteness above ourselves. And I truly do think that that's where the act of revolution begins. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm going to go into allyship now. And I'm just going to switch up a little bit and talk about, because Pam, you talk a lot about Trudeau in this book. And personally, I think he's full of shit, but that's me.
No.
That's just me. I do know that.
Crying.
Oh God, and his blackface. Okay. So for me, I here we are. I think of our political system as, really pumping out these duds, because that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to pump out people who don't really want to do anything. It's supposed to elevate people who put Canada first in their bios. It's supposed to be that. So the more I think about it, is the more I think, oh, the system is working exactly the way it's supposed to. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, well, exactly. And you just hit on like what Catherine's talking about, you know, about what people are supposed to do, especially women, and what citizens are supposed to do. And everything we've been taught is wrong, because it's all about a good citizen votes and then goes away for 5 years and just, you know, mind your own business, and the people in power will go and do what they want to. And then as individuals, you know, you're supposed to always look outward. You're taking care of your family, you're doing your job, you're committed to your boss, you're making money for someone else, you're giving money to your bank, and you're not taught, here's how you love yourself. And there's a reason why, because when you love yourself, that just fills you with so much power and energy to give to other people in a good way. And it means that you care enough about yourself to start questioning, hey, what are these guys doing in office that's hurting all of these people? I don't want my kids to grow up this way. And you start speaking out. You feel stronger and powerful enough. And for us as Indigenous peoples, you know, you have this, warriors can only be warriors and protect people if they themselves are healthy and strong, you know, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And that requires attention. That requires you giving your body, you know, proper food and water and rest and time for yourself and spirituality and all the things that you need as an individual. And so, you know, you think about what we've been taught as citizens, like the very worst kind of citizen is the one that just votes and then goes away. But you've been taught to do that. They've taught us that you go along to get along, that passivity is good, that smiling is good, that everyone getting along is good, and that conflict is bad, disruption is bad, speaking out is bad, and challenging is bad. But what people fail to realize is that every monumentous thing that's ever happened on this planet in human societies has come after a collection of humans have come together and said, no, we're not doing this. We're fighting for civil rights. We're fighting for women's rights. We're fighting for Native rights. We're fighting for the planet. And every single right or protection that we had, we gained through conflict and disruption. And so if we're going to save this planet, if we have any hope in hell of saving this planet, we're going to have to be as disruptive as hell and challenge everything. Tinkering around the edges, making tiny legal reforms or policy reforms is not going to do it. What's going to do it is we abolish the police. We stop pipelines and we make it absolutely prohibitive to hurt other people. And I think when we start putting our lives ahead of politics, then we're going to be good. But that's going to come from taking care of ourselves. And it's also going to come from being disruptive citizens. And that's our job, in fact. We have a legal obligation to be disruptive, because in any country that calls itself a democracy, where is the real power? According to their theories, the power is in the people. The people are the government. But we have been silent because we've been taught to be. And it's time that we just blow it all up and disrupt ourselves back into humanity.
Well, look where silence has gotten us. Yeah, definitely. Look at where silence has gotten us. It's brought us here to this point of chaos and anarchy. And it wasn't because we were disruptive. It's because we stayed silent and said nothing.
Silence
it's amazing
is violent. We stop shooting people on the street and we stand there. We see homeless people laying on the street. And when we're quiet, we are part of allowing it to happen. And that's what this whole people's movement that we're engaged in right now is saying, no, we're not going to stay silent and we're not going to stop talking, and we are going to tear it all down. And I don't think they just realize just how powerful this movement is, because we've literally coalesced. We've gone from Black Lives Movement by itself, Indigenous peoples by itself, anti-poverty by themselves, and we're all coalescing into one group, and we're not going to be able to be stopped.
Well, I am truly excited about that. What a time to be alive. Wow. In some way, I'm so thankful because I'm not living in a time of passivity anymore. You know, and that is exciting to me. And you know what the thing is? I always used to ask myself, like, you know, years prior, who would I be in the civil rights movement? Like, I've asked myself this question. Well, and now I know. So I'm happy with the answer. But there was a time when I was, just went along to get along too. And it didn't do me any good. It left me, where it leaves us? It leaves us without power. That's where it leaves us. And that's why we're encouraged to be silent. It's because if we actually got together and said something, we would be powerful. And that's a threat to the status quo. So I don't understand how politicians can, especially those who represent the status quo, who come from the status quo, who have gotten to their points by being silent enough about things. How are we going to look at them to fix anything? They're not going to fix anything. It has to come from us.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why would they?
Mm-hmm. I also want to add that it's like, it's not, sometimes it's even worse than silence. I find that it's that horrible, insidious, like snake in the grass kind of talking. That it's performative, it's surface, it's superficial. Posting of the black square in support of Black Lives Matter.
No one asked
posting
for that. The emptiness of land acknowledgements and the way that I just feel like it's and that was something that I really wanted to capture in the book, is that I was just so done with rhetoric, and I want us to believe it in our bodies. Yes.
Even in our bodies, it means that we would never let genocide happen. Because especially we have to believe it in our bodies now when we are dealing with, environmental collapse, is that we are looking at, like the mass hunger. We're looking at mass unemployment. If we have such limited resources, you have to believe it in your body that all of us deserve equal access to resources. Mm-hmm. You have to believe it. And if they're not going to, if you don't have it in your body, we are facing imminent disaster.
Yeah, sure. You have to think critically. I mean, look at what happened within a month of the entire world shutting down from this pandemic. A month after years of telling us climate change is false, there's nothing we can do about it, we can't turn it around now. Within a month, rivers were running clear, the air was clear in countries, animals were coming back. I mean, animals and fish and birds that they hadn't seen, like all of it. Plants started to grow within a month of us stopping our destructive human activity. So of course it's possible. It made all of those deniers liars and exposed. And it's, like what you're saying about feeling it in your body, we also have to use our mind and question everything. We're so focused on looking for the exceptions, the bad apple. We know there's a bad apple in every group. If we just get rid of that one bad police officer, then we're going to be okay with policing. But when we're designed to take away Native people from their lands and control the movement of Black slaves, they've never changed. And you can apply that everywhere.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate what you're saying, Catherine, and the example that you set. So even if it's on social media and people who follow you or see you see that you're like, no, I'm taking care of myself and I don't care what other people are saying, you're empowering other young girls and other racialized people and people from various backgrounds to be like, you know what, that's okay to do. We don't have to follow the old role models. But I'd also just like to add really quickly too that, Black, Indigenous, and racialized people and people who have been oppressed and for many, many years, we also have to be able to forgive ourselves for being colonized. That's what colonization is. So some people didn't speak up and they didn't act. And thank goodness, because maybe we would all have been wiped out.
Yes.
And some of us, we were quiet to live another day, and we can't be hard on ourselves or judge ourselves for the ways in which we were trying to navigate the minefield of genocide. I mean, how can you fault anybody. So I think we always have to remember to be the soft place to fall, to forgive ourselves for what's happened. It's not my fault that I'm not fluent in my language, and I'm okay with that. But it took many years for me to come around to that.
That is powerful in itself, and I think I completely agree, because, you know, I look back and I'm like, but that's the way that I was taught to survive or to thrive. You know, thriving is really where sometimes I just want to say, surprise, bitches, we're still here.
Yeah.
You tried to wipe us out, but now we're causing shit. Okay. And, you know, I think that's important to remember, that survival was really the part where we're supposed to all die.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's remember that. And our ancestors at least did enough for us to be born eventually.
Yeah.
And I tell my parents, actually, so my parents have I grew up in politics too, and politics around the dinner table and stuff like that. Not as much as you, but I remember my dad, to this day, my dad doesn't buy Gillette because, Gillette products, because of what they did in terms of closing all the Canadian manufacturing and so on and so forth. Till this day, okay, that was like 40 years ago, till this day. And so I look at them and I'm just like, listen, this fight, you did your best, right? But our fight is generational. And so when I look at white people who are just dipping in and they're already tired, I'm like, what did you think this was? Like, what did you think, that you were just going to Instagram your way to freedom or to allyship? I don't think so. And so I also want to say that nobody can tell us how to fight. Nobody could tell us how to protest. That in itself is white supremacy. So, people love to bring up Martin Luther King, but, in his letter from the Birmingham jail, he says, first, I must confess that over the past years, I've been greatly disappointed with the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direction, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom. Like, that's what it is. And, the pieces that I'm sorry I didn't get to capitalism in this, because I that's a huge part of it. The environmental.
I'm sorry, I'm just laughing at that. Like, that would make a very funny T-shirt. It's like, I'm sorry I didn't talk about capitalism today.
Yeah.
I really am. Like, there's so much ground to cover. But let's in our last moments, let's talk about capitalism and how capitalism has really set the stage and created the structure by which we are valued as humans. And this adherence to the profit margin and GDP and so on and so forth has left humanity by the wayside. The callousness of our society is a capitalist one, is my point. So.
Yeah. I mean, like, there was something that I really came to realize once the pandemic hit, was that all of the ways that capitalism had taught my body to be, and how I have to fight against it, is that when I feel the need to hoard, I had to fight it by sharing, and I had to really force myself to constantly just share what I had. Mm-hmm. When I felt scared about the future, I just stayed as present as possible in my body, no future tripping. And when I felt that I needed to sort of manipulate the future and be a leader in things, I was like, no, it's time for me to step aside and make sure that There are other people who have way less privilege than myself to be able to make really big decisions, and I need to be able to follow their lead. So it's I guess because I feel like we're watching capitalism slowly like disintegrating, like it's collapsing, and the collapse is feeling very liberating for me in my body. And so I'm actually quite excited about it. I'm scared, yeah, of course scared, but I'm really excited about developing new systems of being.
And can we have systems of community? What happened to that? Like, there are other ways, is my point. But no, we have this. Our adherence to the strict order of hierarchy is a problem for me. You know, climate change obviously is not going to be solved by capitalism. It's going to be solved because we have community actions. So, you know, I will take this time to ask the audience if they have any questions, because I know we've been talking and I'm super excited, and this is really like,
we should have had food. I just feel I would have been able to, like, you know, just like talk over like a really good roast or something. That would be
gosh, if we had like a dinner.
I know.
That
would be fantastic, except for the viewers. There is nothing worse than watching someone eat a beautiful roast or an apple pie or something awesome when you're really hungry.
I know, but I just think this would have been such a great like community thing of like all of us just discussing it. I
know.
But yeah, if anybody has any questions.
Yeah. So many of these issues, sometimes people have questions like right off the hop. Sometimes like these are really big issues, and not everyone has been grappling with them for their entire lifetime, and it can be like really overwhelming. Like I found it so funny when you said, Catherine, that one of your critics said, you know, oh, you're trying to deal with too much. If only we could create our own life menu where we're not dealing with a pandemic and racism and genocide and climate change. We're only going to deal with capitalism right now, you know. But that's not what we're dealing with. We have to deal with all of these things, and we've been not looking at them for a really long time. And capitalism is its own worst enemy. It's like the police. Like I have to laugh because the police in the States have shown, and in Canada, have shown us on video and in pictures and in their own actions exactly why we're calling to defund the police. Like, you can't categorize what's been happening in the States as anything other than police riots. They're not, you know, Black Lives Matter protests. They're actually police riots, desperate to maintain power. And it's the same here, you know, where you've got citizens now critically looking at capitalism and saying, okay, in a pandemic, why is it that all of these corporations and extractive industries and banks are getting billions in bailouts while people are getting what? You know, a little bit of funding every month to try to, most won't even pay their mortgage. But then you look at the profits that banks are posting and you're like, they got a bailout, but they're making the highest profits they've ever made, and the people are suffering. And so, you know, they're making the case for their own dismantling. Oh, and I think, Erica,
we have some questions.
Yes.
Okay. So I didn't want to interrupt you, Pam.
No, we're good.
So what are your favorite methods of self-care?
You go ahead, Pam.
Well,
even I have an answer to this.
Yeah, I know. It's really about exercise. And you might think, well, how is that self-care? That's just work. But for me, you know, as much as I have to have a lot of conversations about myself to actually get into the mode. But once I'm at the lakefront and I go for a run, I mean, it's just the fresh air and being thankful that this planet still exists. It really puts you in a place of gratitude, and you can't help but be happy when you're thankful. Right? You're not thinking about all of these other things, and then all of the adrenaline and all of the serotonin that goes through your body, and you know you're doing good for your body and that you've paid attention to yourself. To me, that's like a daily kind of self-care. And I guess on a periodic basis, every other year but this year, my annual self-care is all of the powwows and ceremonies that we do in our nations, like primarily during the summer. We weren't able to do that this year, and I'm really feeling it, because that's where it's like, oh man, I'm in this place. No one judges you. Everyone loves you. You're eating food. No one's saying, oh, but wait a second, that doesn't have enough vitamins in it. It's like, you know what? I'm going to eat some fry bread, and I'm going to have this pop and these fries, and I'm going to just enjoy myself. And, you know, you're with community, and it just feels so good and so safe. So those are the things I do.
Oh, I love that, Pam. It's yeah, like all of that you're saying is very similar to what I do. I live about 200 meters away from the Lake Ontario, and I'm just about 2 kilometers away from the Rouge River.
Oh yeah.
And my partner and I, every morning we get up, and no matter the weather, we walk the lakefront. And I know a lot of people don't have that privilege of having access to water, but it's hilarious. You know, living in Scarborough, there were so many friends that were like, I'm so sorry, I want to visit, but I don't go anywhere farther west than no farther east than Yonge Street.
Oh my.
And I'm like, but now, I mean, like, I know that it's difficult in the pandemic to be in an urban area. It must be so difficult. For us, I just feel so blessed that we have this nature. We've watched, like, I've been here since I was 10 years old, and just watching like cycles of animals, getting to know them. When we kayak, like having like the heron get to know us, and the ducks getting to trust us. Like it really does feel like a blessing to have all of those things. And then also what we do, we do it even more now. It's like anytime there's any kind of victory, anything that we're happy for, like, getting food for half off, or like, getting a contract, or whatever it is, my partner and I, we just silly dance.
Yeah.
Like, it's the ugliest possible dancing. It has to be the ugliest dancing ever. And we just try to find the joy in those tiny things. During this time, that's all you can do, is just to find joy in things that you didn't find joy in before.
Little pieces of joy are very important and very empowering. And it's so funny how empowering gratitude really is. And I really learned that this, obviously, during the pandemic, and, just going outside, experiencing sunshine. The fact is, we had a beautiful summer, and to me, that was a blessing in itself. If we have to be at home, just enjoying and taking in everything around you. I saw my neighborhood in a different light.
Yes.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is my place. Like, this is my hood, like the belonging, and community is very important. So next question, what are some of the actionable things we can do on a day-to-day basis to be better allies to marginalized people? Very important question.
Yeah, go ahead, Catherine, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. So it's something that I talk about in the book with regards to the allyship creed that the resistance movement creates, which is when I see when I do not act, I am complicit. When I know wrong is happening, I act. I stand aside and uplift the words of the oppressed instead of taking up space. And when I'm corrected, I take it in and I change my ways. Now, that creed, I made it so that there are gestures that are accompanying it, because I really feel that white supremacy teaches our bodies to shut down so that we're just speaking from here up. And then we see this in the way that our government operates, and Mr. Trudeau with his dabbing at his pretend tears, is that when people
his weaponized tears.
when people like pretend to be allies, it actually can be quite harmful. Is that you know, because then it centers their vanity project, as you were mentioning, Erica, and instead sidestepping actual change. What I feel the number one thing is that allyship has to be a daily physical and intellectual practice. So that it's something that we learn, so that when we're, you know, conversations around the dinner table, all the way to the policies that we're authoring in our governments, is that it has to be an embodied change. If it's not there, again, we are headed to imminent disaster.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, this is one of the questions that we get all the time, right? What can allies do? And I think it's an important question because, you know, some of us have been engaged in this our whole lives, you know, like there are lots of allies I have in anti-poverty groups, human rights groups, anti-homelessness groups, Black Lives Matter. And, you know, we've been going through the motions, and some people, you know, as much as it shocks us, are literally just coming to this now because it's being presented in full force. And so what do you do? And, you know, I tell people, the government has done a real disservice. We've never been educated on any of these things, you know, social justice, Indigenous issues, the real history. We've been fed propaganda. But now that you know, or now that you have an inkling, you have not only an opportunity, but a moral obligation to self-educate. People have been willfully blind and conveniently blind, because here in Canada, for the majority of Canadians have access to really good education systems, computers, internet, information. You can literally Google anything. And all of these crisis issues have been in the media for decades. So for people not to know, they might not know everything, but come on, we've known there's a problem for a while. So one, you have an obligation to self-educate, and then you have an obligation to act on that. So education for action, not for information, not for entertainment. And you might not know, well, what is it that how do I act in what way?
Yes. And how do we act politically? How do we give support?
Well, and it all depends.
And so on and so forth.
Each person has to look at what is it that you have to offer. Some are artists. Some are researchers, some work in communications, some work in IT. I mean, what is your specialty? What is your skill that you can offer? Never go to a group and say, what do you want me to do? You come to us and say, look, I do IT. I can set up a website for you. I can maintain it for you. Someone else might have a really successful business and they can donate resources, donate legal fees when people are protesting. So you need to figure out
exactly.
And we don't all have to do the same thing. We're not calling on everyone to be a protester. Mm-hmm. You can be the one who babysits the kids of the one who goes and protests. And that is so monumentally powerful. But figure it out. And you've got to come to that so that when you come to us, we're now engaged. We've both done some homework on this. And that's what I would say to allies.
I would also say, be a witness, bear witness. Being a witness, using your privilege in whiteness and being a witness to and supporting somebody else's experience. And when I say this could be at work, this could be in legal matters, this could be, anywhere really. But to say, yes, I saw that, and this is exactly what happened, and it's exactly as this person says, is also support. Mm-hmm. It allows us to not fear being gaslit. Mm-hmm. This country always is also a master of gaslighting, and so I think that's something else that we can do. So in that form, I guess moving on to the next question is, how do we divest from the status quo?
I'll let you say something, Pam. Go ahead.
No, I say we defund everything that's not working. The police don't work, defund them. Capitalism doesn't work, stop paying into it. What we need to withdraw our money, our consent, our effort, and our support for anything that doesn't work. And that includes governing systems that don't work, laws that don't work, because, there are many ways in which we're actively participating or we're passively acquiescing. So when we're not challenging people who are trying to roll back time and deny women the ability to choose whether or not they can make decisions around their body, then you're acquiescing to it. And so you're participating. And we just have to decide where we're going to participate. And I think we withdraw our money, we withdraw our taxes, we withdraw where we're putting things. That, I mean, we have the power to mess up a lot of things. Because keep in mind, who pays for it when the police shoot and kill an unarmed Black man? Well, it's all of us. We pay for it, in fact. We pay for his salary while he's on leave. We pay for his lawyers, and we pay for the lawsuit that's settled afterwards. Why the hell are we paying for racism to continue with impunity? We need to stop.
I love that, Pam.
Agree.
I love that, Pam. There was something that Amanda Paris from CBC had posted on Twitter, which was so powerful.
She's so great.
I love her. But she had mentioned something, I'm not going to do it justice, but something along the lines of, I'm seeing a lot of my friends on my social timelines trying to prove that systemic racism exists, but we have better things to do, which is to dream big.
Yes.
And I think that that's it, to decenter whiteness. I want to stop saying, guys, systemic racism exists, blah, blah, blah. I want to just stop saying that and just to say, actually, let's just start dreaming. What are the systems that can actually serve all of us well? Like imagining a world without police, imagining a world in which there's shared resources, and that we can have safety, like true safety. That I think that's what for me feels good. It feels good to not give a shit about trying to prove that things have that we have endured the wrongs of society. I don't want to prove it anymore. Instead, I just want to focus on making sure that my QT BIPOC community is living a safe life.
So I'm going to pick up on that Amanda Paris reference, and I think it probably stems from a Toni Morrison quote, which says the very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being. So, yeah. And the last question is, so somebody asked, being biracial, the concept of not being enough hits home in one way or another. For any of you that have experienced that in some way, what has helped you grow comfortable in your hyphenated identity? That's a great question, by the way. Our last question and the great one.
Pam, what you had said with regards to language, like loss of language, really resonated with me because I remember my mom being told back in the 70s, I guess in around 1980, because I was 3 years old and not speaking yet. There were 6 languages being spoken in my home at that time. Wow. And the doctor said to my parents, if you want her to have a good life, you just need to just speak just English in the house. And so all of those languages, including 5 different dialects of Filipino language and Spanish, was taken away from me, and I can only speak English fluently. Of course, I sort of have a sense of those dialects in my body, like I can sort of understand it, but it's not in me, you know. Mm-hmm. It feels like a theft of a part of my body.
Yes.
I feel like that to me has been a big process for me, is this idea of language reclamation, with me because of the fact that I'm not necessarily for many weird reasons, most of it being queerness, is that I'm not really in touch with a lot of people from the Filipino community. However, with my partner who is Navajo, is that we we practice language on the regular because it's part of our reclamation. And for me, it's very important too, is, you know, in respect for my in-laws, is that I am going to be learning the language with absolute sincerity. So not like this, you know, little thing where I'm like, I'm just going to learn a few little phrases so that people can praise me for being amazing. It's like, I want to actually
swear words.
just you know, just the, you know, the ones that will really impress people. It's not about that. It's like actually understanding like the concept of the language. The language has a very different rhythm and a very different a different breath system that I want to capture, and I want to get it in my body. And so for me, that has been a big journey, as going like, well, this is my family now. I have to respect my family. I want to make sure that when I am on the res, that we can converse, and that they can, and that we can have the freedom of a language together, which is so lovely. So that for me, that's my journey right now, and it feels good. It feels like I'm on the right path. So yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, and for us as Native peoples, especially here in Canada, we still have an Indian Act that governs and says who's an Indian and who isn't. And not just who is and who isn't, but what category of Indian. Are you a 6-1 A, B, C, D, E, or F Indian, or a 6-2 Indian? And then even Section 6-1C has been now broken down, Section 6-1C1, A1, B1, C1. So, and that's completely outside of our control. That's the federal government saying who's Native and who isn't. And it has nothing to do with culture. It has nothing to do with where you came from, who your family is, where you lived, where you didn't live. And it certainly doesn't have anything to do with actual blood quantum. Because if there's one thing we know from science, is you don't get half your blood from your mom and half your blood from your dad. Like, it doesn't work that way. This ideology of purity and non-purity. So in this context of, well, am I Native enough? First of all, am I an Indian? Am I not an Indian? Am I Mi'kmaq? Am I not Mi'kmaq? Am I treaty, non-treaty? Am I res, non-res? And it's like all of these.
Are you a man or a woman?
Oh my goodness. It's just so,
because that's
so oppressive that it's a real struggle. And it's taken a long time for me to come around to being comfortable in my skin and saying, yeah, I'm Mi'kmaq. You know, I'm Mi'kmaq. I'm also an Indian. I'm also First Nations. And you can call me Indigenous or Aboriginal or, you know, all of these other things. And I'm okay with all of that stuff. But boy, it is still a struggle for many of us to decolonize and not judge one another. Oh, you're the 6'2 Indian? Well, that's not a real Indian, you know, only 6'1 category. And so it's an ongoing struggle for us.
At the end of the day, to fully decolonize, no matter who you are, and definitely if you're biracial and hyphenated, is you have to decide who you are. You have to, and hopefully you decide that outside of a white context. And I think that is just without that white context, and especially I can only imagine if, you know, if you have a family that's, I don't know, not as decolonized, how difficult that must be. But I mean, I personally can't speak to that, but I can only speak to, you know, like really building my own identity and not listening to what people tell me, who people tell me I am. Because once you let people define who you are, they will never define who you are in the best space for you. Right? It will never be that. It will never be what's best for you. Because if it were, then they wouldn't impose anything on you, right? They would just let you be. So thank you. This has been I was so excited. This is a riveting conversation. And I just want to say thank you for having me host. And thank you for this brilliant conversation we've had. And, you know, I pick up Crosshairs and Warrior Life. That's what I know. Okay? Use your capitalism that way.
Yeah.
You want to help?
Yes.
That's resistance. Okay. Maya.
Yes. All I can
I will
say.
turn it over to you.
All I can say is Thank you. Thank you so much for your powerful readings. Thank you so much for this powerful conversation. There are things in this conversation that I will be thinking about for a long time. There are a lot of new things I learned. One of them being resistance can't happen without self-care. That was a big one for me personally to learn. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm ready to break down the marketing campaign, the propaganda machine of Canada with you all. All of us at Watts are very grateful to have been able to host this conversation with you all tonight. And in fact, when we were marketing this event on Facebook and Instagram, elsewhere, talking about the propaganda machine, they weren't allowing us to use the word resistance in the title, Narratives of Resistance, in the copy
Really?
of any of our posts. So propaganda machine indeed. So thank you all again for this incredibly powerful conversation. To our viewers at home, this will be available for rewatch immediately. I, for one, will be rewatching this weekend. So thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you to everyone who tuned in at home. Again, if you would like to order these books, we strongly recommend that you do, and you can find them with our friends at Another Story Bookshop. The link should be down in the comments below and also on a banner. Yeah, thank you all so much. And we're just getting started. This coming Monday, September 14th at 7 p.m., we're presenting a special conversation and live recipe demo with Chef Joshna Maharaj, author of Take Back the Tray, Revolutionizing Food in Hospitals, Schools, and Institutions, with Paul Taylor, CEO of Food Share Toronto. And coming up on Tuesday, September 15th, we have partnered with Wild Words North to discuss how children's literature can help us decolonize, with authors Christy Jordan Fenton, Rebecca Thomas, and Dr. Jenny K. Dupuy. Details and registration for these events and more are available on our social media accounts or on our Eventbrite and in the banner below and in the comments section. And of course, don't forget to register for Watts 2020, our first ever virtual festival of storytelling, ideas, and imagination, streaming live on September 26th and 27th. To support the Word on the Street and events like this one, please visit thewordonthestreet.ca and click the donate button. Donate button, rather. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great evening.